Hi everyone, we are from Group 3 in Poetry class. In this video we will explain about diction in poetry, and in this material we will explain each part starting from the definition role, analyze, denotation and connotation, types, tips, why it's important and how to identify. Each of us will explain very briefly but clearly, so don't skip. Hopefully you can understand well. And before starting, my friend will explain first what poetry is.
Hello everyone, my name is Sintika Agatawoli and I want to explain about the definition of poetry. We talk about the definition. Poetry is a language spoken or written according to some pattern of repetition that emphasizes the relationship between words on the basis of sound as well as meaning. This pattern is almost always about a rhythm. The look, sound, and language of poetry all work together to create a total effect for a good poem. Thank you.
So there is the definition of poetry by my friend. So now you already know what is poetry. And then what is diction? What is diction in poetry? Diction refers to the words and grammatical construction that the poet uses in the creation of their person. Poetic diction refers to the operating language of poetry, language employed in a manner that sets poetry apart from other kinds of speech or writing. It involves the vocabulary, the phrasing, and the grammar considered appropriate or inappropriate to the poetry at different times.
The role of diction in poetry. Diction, or a writer's choice of words, has a particularly important place in poetry, as the meaning, sound, and number of syllables in each word is often very important. Diction in poetry defines the tone and many aspects of the style of a given poetry work. In many cases, particularly in poems that must conform to rigid stylistic constraints, the poet must speak words that contain a certain number of syllables and that rhyme with other specific words. Diction is important even in less structured works of poetry, as well as much poetic forms are far less wordy than most works of prose. While a prose writer can often spend several paragraphs on description, a poet often needs to convey a significant piece of information about something in only few well-chosen words. Diction in poetry is also incredibly important because of its ability to convey tone. Words conveying ideas of dryness, darkness, and melancholy will convey a drastically different tone than those suggestive of joy, brightness, and energy. The tone of poem is often used to influence its emotional impact beyond the literal meaning and sound of the words. A skilled poet crafts his diction not only to convey a certain meaning and to sound a certain way, but also to evoke a particular set of emotional responses from readers. Sloppy and careless diction in poetry may succeed in meaning and sound, but is likely to fail to evoke the specific emotional responses to intended by the poet.
Okay, in this video I will explain how does distinction affect the tone of poem. Tone refers to the attitude or mood conveyed by the poem, while distinction refers to the choice of word and word. How does distinction affect the tone? Function of distinction in literature, writers choose words to convey a typical mood, tone, and atmosphere to their readers. A writer's choice of word and his selection of graphic work not only affect the reader's attitude but also conveys the writer's feelings toward the literary work. How does imagery affect the tone? Imagery, the descriptive word used to describe people, place, things, and situations, or create imagery in the mind of the reader. Rather, the reader creates the imagery from the word. The reader ultimately determines tone by memorization of the collective imagery in a text. There are 8 common types of distinction. The first one is informal distinction, pedantic distinction, colloquial distinction, slang distinction, abstract distinction, concrete distinction, poetic distinction. What is distinction and example? Distinction is word choice or the style of speaking that a writer, speaker, or character uses. This distinction that you use when you speak or write should be matched to purpose or audience. In informal writing essays, speeches, distinction should be formal. I think that's all. Thank you.
I'm Jutriana Kamlasi. I will describe diction and interpretation. A diction, one of the degree that makes poetry different from prose, is not only by a matter of the rhyming lines and the lines arrangement, but also the huge number of words that poetry employs. Although it is hard, there are many who derive a great deal of pleasure of reading poetry. And what makes it difficult to understand is the nature of poetry itself, of which language use is different from the ordinary one. Reading poetry is an act of discovery. Exotic consideration should be given to any particular words and the way they are related to the others, which wake up the basic elements of poetry to respond imaginary, figurative language, and musical devices. The word choice in poetry is accurately and steadfastly selected, and therefore it does not acknowledge synonyms. It is invited by manipulating the small differences in meaning between synonyms. This collection of words, which is foundation of every poem, is called diction. B. Interpretation. Alexander, 1975, recently hints that the same poem may be seen differently by different people. This does not mean, however, that poetry can be anything anybody finds in it. All the interpretations are not automatic. All the interpretations are not automatically acceptable. Some may have been quite wrong. Albeit, what is considered to be right is not always exactly the same. Figurative language, by comparison, based on comparison.
Hello, I'm Jocelyn Sinawalai. I would like to tell you about types of diction. Types of diction, there are 5. Number 1, colloquial diction. Colloquial diction is informal in nature and general represent a certain region or time, and annual are examples of colloquial expressions born in rural areas of the United States. Colloquialism add color and realism to writing. Number 2, slang diction. Slang diction contains words that are very specific to a region and time and have been recently coined. These are words used today and spoken out loud by friends or close associates. For example, cancel, let. Saying them in a poem will tell you exactly when that speaker was wrong. Number 3, abstract. This is when a writer uses words to express something intangible like an idea or emotion. And number 4, concrete diction. Concrete diction is the use of words for their literal meanings and often refer to things that appeal to the senses. For example, the sentence, I ate an apple. And number 5, poetic diction. Poetic diction is driven by lyrical words that relate to a specific theme, reflect in a poem, and create euphonious or harmonious sounds. I think that's all. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Maria Paramita Putrisale from class 5A. Now I will describe 5 tips for using diction. Diction refers to the author's choice of words and the order of the words within a poem. Words serve multiple purposes given the present and arrangement. Phrases and unique diction brings the reader into the scene, enabling full precision in the writer's words. There are 5 tips for using diction. The first, choose a topic. You can make a list of words that are with the topic and decide what words best help you say what you want to say. Number 2, purpose. Whether to convince, entertain, amuse, inform, or plead, remember you choose of words your relax on your purpose. Number 3, analyze the vocabulary. Consider whether or not the words are simple or complex. Number 4, analyze the syntax. Syntax is the way a poem arranges the words within a poem. Ordinary syntax is an arrangement of words that follow the way people usually speak or write, while unusual syntax is an arrangement of words that drift away from the way people typically speak and write format. And the last, power poetry. Post and share your news, poem, and power poetry. That's all. Thank you.
The reason why diction in poetry is important because of its ability to convey tone. Words conveying ideas of drearness, darkness, and melancholy will convey a drastically different tone than those suggestive of joy, brightness, and energy. The tone of a poem is often used to influence its emotional impact beyond the literal meanings and sounds of the word. Diction in poetry is also can be used to convey that the speaker is from a certain background or age group, for instance. This use of diction, though much more common in prose, still has an important place in many forms of poetry, particularly when the identity of the speaker is essential to fully understanding the poem.
Hi, my name is Sebastian Sandiati Pamindis. My topic is how to identification. The first one, determine the meaning of the words in the poetry, whether the meaning directly or figuratively. Second, determine the head or the poet. Third, determine the capability or quality of the words in helping the poet to be effective, especially to fit the them. 4. Determine the appropriate of the words in helping the poet to build the mood and image in poetry. That's all. Thank you.
So that's all from me and my friends. We hope this video is useful, and if you want to learn more, you can see the sources I listed here. And forgive us if there are sentences or opinions that are difficult to understand. Thank you very much.